Like I mentioned, today we're doing an introduction to the Python programming language, and we're just going to do like introduction. You don't need any background knowledge. This is just like what is coding and especially how do you code in Python, some basics. So let's get started. So first of all, what is code? Computer code is essentially a set of instructions to the computer, and they have to be written in a certain way so that the computer can understand it. So when you code, you're essentially telling the computer what you want it to do. Unfortunately, the computer can't just understand instructions the way you might give them to a friend. Like if you want the computer to say hi, you can't just tell it say hi because it doesn't know what that means. So as you can see on the slide, the way you might do that in like computer code is you would say print hi. And it's doing the same thing, but it's just doing it in a way that the computer can understand and it knows what you're trying to do. And there's a lot of different rules for how to write code so the computer can understand it. It's kind of like English grammar. You have to put your words in a certain order for your friends to understand it. And essentially, it's just a different kind of word order, but it's the same idea. You have to do it so that the computer knows what you're trying to say. And the different rules for how you have to write your code are called syntax. And so syntax is just how the computer reads in what is written in your code. And most programming languages are pretty similar, but they each have a slightly different syntax or a different set of rules for how the computer reads in code that's written in that specific language. So today we'll go over some Python syntax because Python is the language that's used a lot in machine learning and AI. So that's the language that we're going to be going over with you today. But like I mentioned, most programming languages are pretty similar. So if you're good in Python, you can learn Java or another language pretty easily. So these will be helpful in our next meeting when we kind of go more in depth in AI. So since I think it'd be good to do sort of like a hands-on, I've made a Google Colab where you can have some Python code, and I'm going to share that with you guys. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to get the link. So it should be shared. I'm just going to copy the link and I'll throw that in the chat. Okay, so I'll give everyone a minute to just open that up and then we'll go through the code together and you guys, I can show you how to do it and you guys can do it yourself. So I'll give everyone a minute to open it up. And once you have opened up that link, if you just want to go here to where it says file, and then if you see here, this button, save a copy in Drive, if you click on that, it's going to make a copy of that so that you can actually edit it and you can write whatever you want. You can also add more code or more text. So I'll just give everyone a minute to do that. And if you have any problems or any questions, just remember to chat me. Okay, so I think you guys kind of all open that up again. Again, if you have any problems, I'm keeping an eye on the chat. So let's get back into some of the first things we're going to do. So the first specific sort of piece of programming we're going to talk about is a print statement. So print statements basically just tell the computer to print out whatever it is you include inside the parentheses. So the syntax for a print statement is shown in the picture. You write the word print, and then you put an open parentheses, and then you write whatever you want it to print out, and then you put a closed parentheses. And so if you wanted to print out like a number, you could put that in. And if you wanted to print out some words, you just have to remember to put quotation marks around it because that tells the computer to print out whatever's in those quotation marks. And so if we go over here to our Google Colab file, we can try practicing it ourselves. So if we go here to this sort of a cell where there's some code, you can see this little play button. If you click on that, it'll just run whatever code is in this. So here we have, it says print, and then there's parentheses, there's hi in quotes, and another parentheses. So maybe if you guys just want to think quickly about what you think that's going to do, and then you can run it once you have a prediction. And if you just run this button here, you can see that it will run while that little circle, and it said hi. So hopefully that's what you guys thought it would do. You can see there's the quotes, and it prints out what's in the words. So if we come to the second one, it's basically the same thing. We just have some different words. So it can print out hello world. It's just going to print out whatever is in those quotes. So you guys can like play around with that a little bit. If you want to add more code, you can press this button, you can have it print out whatever you want. And we'll go back to our next piece of code. So the second thing we are going to look at is operations. So these are essentially math terms and they work just like other math. And you can just tell the computer to do whatever you want. For example, in this piece of code here, if you put 3 plus 2 minus 1, it's just going to do that the way you would do math. It's just going to do 3 plus 2 is 5, minus 1 is 4, and the output of that would be 4. And one thing that you do want to note when you're looking at code is that there's no like the multiplication sign is it's called an asterisk. If you hit Shift 8 on your keyboard, it's like that little star. So that's a multiplication sign. And for division, it's just like the slash here. So you just want to remember that when you're coding. But other than that, it's just the same as math. There's nothing special about it. So if we go here, I can show you guys that. So here's addition and subtraction, or just like I mentioned, written normally. So here's addition. If you click the run, that'll say 10 because 5 plus 5 is 10. Here's some multiplication, 4 times 6, that is 24. And then here's some division, 4 divided by 2 is 2. So yeah, if you guys want to like try some different numbers, for example, if we put a 6 here instead of the 4, it'll be 3. So yeah, it's basically just math. Okay.
So now we're going to talk about variables. So essentially variables are names that store values. So in coding, we really always have these different values that are going to be integral or really important in our code. So in order to be able to easily change our variables or these values without needing to always have a number or a string, which is also a word, then we set them equal to a value. So variables are able to keep track of these values, and you can assign a variable to have any value that you need. So if we go over to the Colab, then we can see we have a variable 1, which we assign 5. So variable 1 is going to always equal 5 until we change it. And so the good thing about variables is we can change their values fairly easily. So we also see that we can have multiple variables. So we have variable 2 is equal to 10. So if we want to use those together, then we can find variable 3, and then variable 3 equals variable 1 times variable 2. So instead of writing variable 3 equals 5 times 10, then we can just write variable 3 equals variable 1 times variable 2 using the asterisk. Then if we print variable 3, we can see that variable 3 equals 50 because variable 1 is equal to 5 and variable 2 is equal to 10.
If you guys are following along in the Google Colab, just remember you have to run these because if you don't, it won't know what that variable 1 is. Because yeah, I see a chat, it won't recognize that variable and it will be confused if you don't run the cell first because it just won't know what that is. So just if you're following along, remember to hit this little run button and there'll be this little green check once you've done that. Sorry.
So variables can also keep track of words, and these are called strings. So in order to set a variable equal to a string or a word, we have to use quotation marks. So if we're setting it equal to a number, we can just say the variable name equals 5 or equals 10. But if we're doing a string, which is a word, then we have to say equals and in quotes put whatever word we want it to be. So as you can see in the Colab, we have string 1 equals hello and string 2 equals coders. So if we were to print string 1, we'll run the variables and then run that code. Then you can see that hello is printed. And then we're going to set another variable, string 3 equal to string 1 plus string 2. So essentially what we're doing is we're combining these. The word is concatenate, but it just basically means putting them together. And so when we run that, we're going to make a new variable, which is equal to hello and coders. So when we run print string 3, we're going to see hello coders. And then if conditionals are essentially statements that make a decision based on an observation, and we put in whatever we want that decision to be made based off of. So we use the word if to tell the computer what must be true for an action to occur. So essentially, if we have a variable, say in the example, it says it's equal to 5, then we're going to say if x is less than 10, we are going to print hello world. So the computer, each time it goes through the if statement, checks if x is less than 10. And then if it is less than 10, it prints, or it does whatever is under the if statement. So in this case, since x is 5, which is less than 10, it's going to print hello world. So if we go to the Google Colab again, we can see that day equals Monday. So if day equals Monday, then we will print it is Monday. So if we run that, since day is equal to Monday, it'll run. Now, if we're talking about this and it doesn't meet it, then it'll just skip over this code. So say if we're in the PowerPoint and x equals 11, then the computer is going to look at if x is less than 10. Since 11 is greater than 10, it's not going to print, and it's just going to move on to the next line of code. The same thing that if day equals Tuesday, and we run that, since day is not equal to Monday, since Tuesday is not equal to Monday, it won't print it as Monday. If anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat and we can definitely go over them. Now we're going to move on to loops. So loops are very similar to if statements in the fact that they have a condition, and if that condition is met, the code inside it is run. Except, so essentially when you're coding, you have these repeated steps, and you don't want to always have to repeat same chunks of code over and over again, because that's not really efficient, and you want your code to be easy to read and easy to adjust or easy to edit. So instead we have loops. So loops takes a condition, and if that condition is met, it runs it. And then at the end of that run, it goes back to the while loop, and then it checks the condition again. If the condition is still met, it runs it again. And this continues until the condition is not met. Once the condition is not met, then it drops to below the code, and the code continues. So the problem is with this one, if you're continuously going up to the top, if you don't change the variable that the condition meets, then you'll continuously be running the while statement for infinity. And that'll cause an error, because you never want something to repeat for infinity. Your computer is going to just be crazy. It won't know what to do. So for this one, we have x equals 0. And while x is less than 4, we're going to print wow, and we're also going to increase x. If we didn't increase x, then it would just continuously print wow. And that's called an infinite loop. And we do not want infinite loops. So what we do is x equals 0. And then while x is less than 4, we're going to print wow. So we're going to print wow once. And then x is going to become x plus 1. So x is 0 plus 1, which is 1. Then the computer is going to go back to while x is less than 4. And x is now 1. So since 1 is less than 4, we're going to print wow. And then we're going to increase it by 1. So x is equal to 2. 2 is less than 4. We're going to print wow for a third time. And then we're going to increase it again to 3. And 3 is less than 4. So we're going to print wow out one more time, and then it's going to increase to 4. Now, when we go back to the while statement, x is less than 4, but 4 is not less than 4. So we're not going to print wow, and then we're going to move on to the next line of code. So from this loop, wow is printed 4 times. So if we go to the Google Colab, we see a very similar type of code. So we have a counter, which is equal to 1. And while the counter is less than or equal to 7, so you have the operation signs. You have less than, greater than, or less than or equal to, equal to. So in this case, it's counter is less than or equal to 7. So when counter is less than or equal to 7, we're going to print counter. So we're going to print the value, and then we're going to increase the counter by 1. And this continues until counter is 8 or greater than 7. Since counter is incrementing by 1 every single time, then once it reaches 8, it will stop. So if you guys run that, you'll see that the integers 1 through 7 are printed. And so while loops are very important in making sure that your code isn't so conjoined and it's easier to read, because you don't want to be printing out print counter increase, print it, and then print it again. It makes it difficult to read and difficult to code yourself. And this is just a lot faster. So this is one of the ways that coding has been made easier.
Sorry. There we go.
So now we want you guys to use what you've learned to try a practice problem. So in this practice problem, Charlotte wants to write a code that prints out the message, do not enter 10 times. Create a variable to store the phrase that Charlotte wants to repeat, and then write a loop that prints the statement out 10 times. So we'll give you a few minutes to try and solve that.
And if you have any questions while you're trying to practice that, just send them in the chat, send them to either Chloe or me, and we'll take a look. Okay, so I am seeing one question in the chat. So it looks like you had a problem where it was just repeatedly printing out do not enter. And it was sort of starting to, the little play button, I guess, was kind of like continuing to run. And so what I'm guessing you did is that you forgot to increase your whatever condition it is that you have. And that you probably entered what we addressed previously, which is an infinite loop. And so maybe when I show you the solution, I'll kind of talk about what you might have done wrong. So maybe let's show the solution and I will address that question, but I'm guessing what you did was an infinite loop. So here we go. So this was the one possible solution. So I guess the first thing you would do is you would assign some variable to whatever you wanted to print out. So in this case, we have the variable phrase and it says do not enter because that's what we wanted it to print out. And we're starting at 0. And then we want to say while it's less than or equal to 9. So we want to go from 0 to 9, which would be 10 total because it would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then we're going to print out that phrase, which is do not enter. And we're going to increase the phrase count. And so addressing the question that I got in the chat, I'm guessing that you forgot this line here, or that something went wrong with this line, because if we forgot to do this, this variable phrase count would always be less than 9, right? Because it's always going to be 0. So it's going to kind of run into a problem where it does that forever. So maybe try adding that line or seeing if you have that and try that again for the question I got.
Another question that was seen in chat is that do not enter was printed 11 times. So one of those issues could have arose if you said that while phrase count, you started phrase count is equal to 0, and then phrase count is while phrase count is less than or equal to 10. So when you think about it, you have to think that 0 is included in that if you're starting at 0. So there are really two options to go about that. If you're starting phrase count at 0 and you want to do less than 10, or you want to do less than or equal to 9. If you do less than or equal to 10, then you have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, because you're including 0 in that count. So in that case, you'll go over by 1 and you'll go over the bound that you want. So if you want it to be 10, you can either start at 0 and go less than or equal to 9, or less than 10, or you can start at 1 and then do less than or equal to 10.
Okay, I'm not getting any other questions. So I guess we can move on. And again, if you have any questions at all, just chat me or Chloe. And so yeah, like I said, we have the Google Colab. And if you guys have your Google Colab and you want to, do something else, have it pronounce something else, if you just hit this little button up here, it's just going to add another little code box and you can write whatever you want there. So that's like a really cool thing about Google Colab. You don't have to like save it or anything. It's going to save automatically and you can just always access it in your Google Drive. So yeah. So that was it for today. I hope you guys had fun with that. I love coding. I know Chloe loves coding, and I hope you guys love it too. It can be really fun. And using these few simple tools we learned today, you can make some really complex and really interesting code. And each line might just be something like an if statement or a while loop, and you can do some pretty cool stuff. So our next meeting is going to be in a week. It'll be June 18th, same time, 11 to 12. And so this is going to be our last meeting. We are going to be doing another session next fall, hopefully get a little more into some of these topics. But in our last meeting this time, we'll discuss the basics of AI and we'll provide a little more in-depth introduction than we did on day one. And we'll walk you guys through coding your own simple machine learning model. So you guys will actually be able to code a machine learning model, which is really exciting. And we hope you guys have some fun with it. And between now and then, if you go to the bottom of this Google Colab, we have a link here to our website. And if you go on that, I provided some links to some good practice problems. If you click on any of these are websites. They have a ton of practice problems. They can get really complicated. You guys can start on whatever level you want. And there's also a ton of other great resources for any extra practice if you want between now and then or moving on. So thank you so much for joining us. We hope you had fun. We'll stick around for any questions in the chat or if you guys have any questions, but I think I'll stop the recording and thank you all for coming so much.
Thank you.